Good evening. My name is Steve, and I hope you enjoy this coffee chat session. What it is an introduction to something called Coffee Chat on improving the quality of our life experiences. I've been doing this for quite some time in a live forum where I started out with a few friends around the table and then grew to something larger. And now I'm on the road quite a bit, so I just wanted to share a little bit about the history of coffee chat a little bit and give you a sample of what a coffee chat could look like. So hopefully over time, this can be an ongoing thing where people can come together and share ideas that are helpful. This is my first time on Google Chat, so if there's some errors in the video quality or whatever, this is probably why. All right. I'm going to go pretty much off the top of my head for some of it. I will refer to a couple of notes, and then when I go to showing you about a meeting, what a meeting looks like, I'll refer more to the notes. This idea began back in probably about 2008, 2007 when I was in Vancouver. I had read a book. I think it was either a Wallace Wattles book or it was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it had to do with the idea of a mastermind. I had realized at that point, reading about the mastermind, that there was a lot of negativity in the world. A lot of the people I worked with, the media, the news, a lot of this stuff was negative. And in fact, I used to like to listen to the radio. I like country music. I like different kinds of music. And some of it was like a punch in the head, but especially when the news would come on. It was either about government or about tragedy or about something like this, and it would bring me down. It would be like an emotional roller coaster. And one time I was talking to a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, and he'd been hospitalized for a while. And he shared a wonderful story with me. He shared a story about how he'd almost died in hospital. He was diagnosed with something very serious, I forget what it was, and he wasn't given a lot of chance of recovery. But he had been a guy who worked on himself, on personal growth, on self-development, knowing himself. And he began to read a lot into that while he was sick, as much as he could. He began to put his thoughts on as many positive things as he could and so on. And he didn't attribute this to his turnaround, but he felt it might have had something to do with it. And he became very grateful for his life that he had. It changed his life, really. So listening to him, I realized that was an amazing story. And I began to think, you know what, is it possible that each and every one of us has something of value to share? And wouldn't that be great to get together with a group and actually contribute these things? Not so much as in a debate, but just a sharing of ideas on improving the quality of our lives. Sort of like what TED Talks says. TED Talks, their tagline is ideas worth sharing. Well, I did share this idea, this overall concept with a few of my friends. They thought I was completely bonkers. They thought it was a crazy idea, except for one of my friends who, in Vancouver at the time, welcomed me to her house to have the first event, back in 2008 probably. And there was her and I, and there was one friend of mine, and then later on her teenage son came home, so there was four of us, and we had a chat about, I forget what the topic was about, something to do with something divine, divination or something this guy was talking about for quite a while. I don't remember what it was all about, but anyways, it was the first go. And then our family moved. We had decided to move at one point, and our house had sold. We decided to move to the prairies near Saskatoon. So the idea got put on hold, but it wouldn't die inside of me. It would not die. Consequently, in the fall of 2009, not knowing anybody there, I had been noticing this concept on the prairies they called Coffee Row. And what it is, if you go to the prairies, you'll still see it in small towns. Saturday morning at the local restaurant, you'll see a lineup of pickup trucks. And in that restaurant, there'll be a table of men and a table of women, and those are the local farmers. And they'll be talking gossip, local gossip, and they'll be talking about their crops and about their shops. And I'm not sure what the women talk about. Probably something similar on the feminine side of things. I did go to a few of these things. A dear friend of mine, a neighbor of mine, as I lived out there, invited me a few times, but I didn't really relate to it. However, I thought this is an interesting forum, an interesting format, vis-a-vis my friend who shared that wonderful idea about him recovering and my friend's place in Vancouver. So in the fall of 2009, not knowing anybody and where to go with this, I just ran an ad on Kijiji in the group section or something like that. And Kijiji, if you're not familiar with what it is, it's sort of like Craigslist in the area, in that area. Not maybe surprising to me. I did get a few contacts, but not much interest. But there was one lady who contacted me, very interested, because she wanted to do something similar. And we did meet up a couple times and strategize a little bit, and then it turned out early January 2010, her and I started this thing, and within a few months, by March or so, we had more than a dozen people probably showing up to this event, mostly her friends, because she knew a lot of people there. However, by the end of March, maybe early April, we had a falling out because she suggested I do my own thing because we didn't have the same ideas, really, in terms of the group. But I did learn a lot from her. It was instrumental. Without her, I would never have done this, because I learned where to meet, what kind of places to meet in, how to facilitate these sort of meetings. I would observe her. Furthermore, her and I had talked about being better public speakers, and I had at one time gone to a Toastmasters meeting but never made real plans to join. But I mentioned Toastmasters to her, and her being an action person, she jumped on this idea. She found a really good Toastmasters club in the city and she joined it. And then she invited me to join, and I joined Toastmasters and made a huge run of it. And I'm going to give a little plug here, CBA Toastmasters in Saskatoon, fantastic club. I've learned so much from them, and I never would have been able to do. I got to the point of speaking in front of several hundred people in an auditorium and facilitating coffee chat meetings, which got bigger and bigger. I wouldn't have been able to do that had it not been for my experience with Toastmasters and the confidence I developed there. So a little plug for them. Now, but this is one of the reasons why it was so instrumental for me to join, to get on that line. And this is a little bit off topic, but when I started my own coffee chat in the spring of 2010, within about a month or two of starting it, there was all of a sudden about 10 people at the event. And I was to give a presentation. I had never done that before. I was okay one-on-one or a few people, but I completely froze. And if it wasn't for my continued work on myself through Toastmasters, I would never have been able to handle larger groups and be able to speak in front of them. Now, along that line, though, of the coffee chat, the early coffee chat after the experience with this lady, the first one that I ran an ad for in Kijiji again this spring. Once again, I already had 4 or 5 people who I had contacted through the winter, and I invited them to. About 3 or 4 maybe said they were going to come. My wife couldn't come that night for some reason. So it was 4 or 5 minute come, so I booked this corner booth in a restaurant. It had an elevated level, kind of a dark and sort of a piano bar style restaurant. And I sat in the corner of the room, in a corner of the booth, so I could see the whole area. It was about 5 minutes after, and I'm thinking, well, nobody's coming here tonight, and nobody's showing up. And here I am, middle-aged man, sitting in the corner of a darkened room. This middle-aged lady walks across the room, with a notepad in hand, ready to take notes. And she asked me quite timidly, "Is there a discussion group here tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm it." So, you know, she was very timid for a good reason, because here was this guy who was looking rather perhaps intimidating, and certainly it might have looked like a very pathetic pickup try, is what it might have looked like. So, needless to say, the discussion did not last long. Well, she was brave enough to sit kitty corner on the booth, and we chatted sort of uncomfortably for about 10 minutes, and then she finally said, "I think it's time to go," and she left. I would have quit that night if it wasn't for my wife, who said, "You know what, Steve, you've been after this idea for years. You're not going to quit now, are you?" And I didn't, and we kept going, and it continued on till I had to. Well, I guess I didn't have to leave, but I did leave for family reasons in just this spring, and it had grown to events where we, pushing close to 30 people, and hundreds of people who had been involved in it over the years, and larger speakers forum events and so on, and it was very productive. And I actually started one here. I'm in Windsor, Ontario right now for a while. I started one here, Detroit, Windsor chapter of Coffee Chat. You can check it out. You can Google it. However, I'm going to be on the road quite a bit now, and I realized that in order to do this, I'm going to have to do it in different forums. That's what this is all about. This is about being able to take this discussion on the road, to have people join in here if they want to, and eventually you could grow this a worldwide thing, and hopefully promote the idea of sharing, this discussion concept. So what I want to do now, there's just a little preview on it. You can also go to coffeechat.webs.com, and there's my blog. You'll see lots of blog posts, lots of videos, and there's an introduction on the homepage, a little along the lines of this, somewhat along the lines of what I just told you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little preview of how a meeting would go, and just to show you what types of meetings and how this could potentially go here. It's going to be a little bit different here, but nevertheless, there's that similarity, I suppose, because it is kind of like a live forum. In Coffee Chat, we had basically two formats. We had a discussion group, which was a group of people sitting around a table, and just somebody would give a little brief introduction, and then we would have a discussion on a topic. We always had a topic per night, kind of channel our discussion. Otherwise, it's all over the place, and it's the overall banner of improving the quality of our life experience with an individual topic to guide our discussion. As long as that topic could be seen as somehow improving the quality of our lives. If somebody suggests a topic of, self-injury, well, obviously that wouldn't, most people don't want that, so it wouldn't be an appropriate topic. However, any topic about relationships and health and these sorts of things were many of these topics were discussed, as you'll see on the website. So there was basically two topics once again, two formats. One was a discussion group, the other was a speaker-centered event, which we actually eventually called the CK Speakers Forum, but it was an offshoot of Coffee Chat. And I would say that in this video format, what could eventually happen is a guest speaker come in, because I'm not an expert in anything. Professionally, I am not a professional, if I may say so. Basically, my work is that of a handyman. I run hammers and nails and saws and routers, and I rebuild conveyor belts and people's steps and holes in their drywall and things like this. So therefore, I'm a jack of all trades, or of a few trades, and a master of none. So therefore, whatever I'm saying here is not the truth. It's just what I see. It's like, if I tell you I see this notepad in front of me, well, I just see it. I mean, I just see things the way they are, and I'm just sharing it. I'm not trying to put anything across as any kind of gospel truth. It's just sharing of ideas. So it's the same with anybody else, I hope. However, there are people who are very qualified to speak on their topic, and hopefully I'll be able to get people in time to come on as guests and share what they have on a more deep level. There's a lot of people who put a lot of study into a very narrow, a very precise and important area of life. And it's important to be able to get those messages out and share them. What I'll do, though, is I'll give you a format of what we used to do to give you ideas of what might go forward here. And I'll flesh each point out a little bit just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the background of it. So if we were having a coffee chat, if we were 20 of us in the group, whatever, we'd all sit down and say, somebody or myself would say, "Welcome to Coffee Chat." Now, the purpose of this is to have a discussion on improving the quality of our life experiences. Now, I might embellish that a little bit if there was quite a few guests, with this idea that it is my impression that whatever it is we strive for in life, you and I, whoever it is, does so because behind that thing that we want, or that state that we want, or whatever it is a quality we might express as something that is intangible, but yet it is what we want. When we strive for a relationship with somebody else, as an example, what we might really want is love. We don't necessarily want that particular individual. We might, but deeper on, we want love, right? And it's the same with things like, our finances. If we go after, we work for money all day long, well, is it the paper bills and such that we want? Probably not. Probably what we want is the sense of security, the sense of accomplishment, those sorts of things. They're like qualities, Health. We want to be able to feel the sense of freedom, that good health and mobility and the comfort that gives us, So that's why I talk about qualities. There are those intangibles, things that money really can't buy, as the old saying goes. Now, the intention is that it be a positive experience for all those involved. I say all those involved because almost every meeting there are guests who are brand new to the situation. Because of that, and because another overall idea of the concept is to create a brotherly and sisterly relationship environment, like a friendship environment, if you will, for all involved. So therefore, for the most part, we refrain from debate initially. Debate is good at a certain point once we break through the facades that we have built up and we get to the real individual and be honest with each other. But the thing about debate with somebody who might be brand new and a little bit, say, reserved or self-conscious or whatever, it can be seen as attacks. Whereas if we're just sharing, then it doesn't seem like an attack. So rather than debates and arguments, it's more of just a sharing. I mean, somebody can see what I'm saying as patently ridiculous. And I could see something that somebody else is saying is patently ridiculous. But it might very well be sensible to them, and this might be very sensible to me. But the idea in terms of seeing each one another as brothers and sisters, we don't have to get to the point of debate and argument in the coffee chat setting. Once we develop community and friendship, and we have we make contact with friends, and we get to know each other and so on, we can have side discussions going on in other forums then. And then we can really get down to drilling down to other depths, shall we say. But at this level, I think that, and at this point, we found that the debate scenario, when it would start in the coffee chat, it would create rifts in the group. And it didn't seem to be that helpful. So that's just a comment. Now, also what it's not. Normally this would just be a few minutes of introduction, but I'm giving you a little bit of flesh out because this is a first-time event on this forum that can go worldwide. So what it's not an attempt to pitch any idea at anybody, to sell you something. And you can talk to people who are involved in coffee chat. I've never tried to sell anybody anything. I have written several books, but I've never promoted them in terms of, in fact, whatever ones that I did sell, and people had to pay. No, I think I sent them to the bookstore to buy them. I wouldn't bring books and sell them at the coffee chat. No, in fact, whatever books I did sell, I probably sold them at a loss because of the cost of development. I've never, I brag to people, I think I've written 4 books and sold 4 books. So I'm not a great salesman in that department. So also what it's not is an attempt to convert anybody to anything. That's important too, because a lot of these things are a front for something. And once again, I come back to, it's kind of like sitting down with your friend or your brother or your sister you haven't met for quite a while, and you don't think that they're going to pitch you on something to convert you to something, and vice versa. You're just happy to see each other because you enjoy that. And that's what this is meant to be, because when we can get beyond the us and them, the this race, this religion, that religion, this country, that country, and we can see each other as on the level, as equals, then come crashing down is so many of the so-called problems of the world. I mean, really, our whole environment, our whole interpersonal relationships, and all of that stuff gets healed when we become real to ourselves and true to others. That's what this is a bit about. That's a bit on the. So that's a bit of history and a bit of introduction. We usually also have a round of introductions to let everybody know what we, who we are. There's also an opportunity to share upcoming events, which can be great too, because there's a networking of information going on. And then somebody would have a little, when the group was small, it'd be like a 10 or 15 minute presentation to get the ball rolling, and then there'd be a discussion. When the group got big, there wasn't need for that. Maybe just get going on the presentation for a few minutes, and somebody would take it and run. Or when it got big enough, there was 4 or 5 people who rared to go. So no one person had to give a presentation. Just start the ball rolling and keep going in a circle and break into groups and so on. But I'll give you an example of a little presentation that I gave just a few nights ago at a coffee shop here in Windsor, just to give you a little idea of how an idea can get started, a conversation can get started, that is to say. Now, bear in mind that this is the third of a trilogy of topics that we were talking about health, individual human health. We started out with physical health, importance of physical health. We then went to importance of mental health. Then we took up the third ingredient of the human individuality, the emotional health. That's what this particular topic was about. And I'm just going to use my scribble notes here. This is a little mind map of scribble notes that I had. Right in the center I put down one man's view on emotional health. And I made a note here that emotions come from the Old French, which means to move out. Old French and Old Latin. Now, I also took some dictionary meanings, because I find that to drill down on a topic, I like to get the etymology meanings and the common meanings, because certain words will pop out and help me to twig ideas to put down, because once again, it's sharing ideas, right? So I put down emotions. Number one meaning off my dictionary was a natural instinct or state of mind from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. Now I underline and circled circumstances, because that is very important in terms of what we're talking about in the mind part. Circumstances are basically where we find ourselves. And what I talked about there was how there seems to be controllables and uncontrollables in our lives. Right? It's like we can see that the uncontrollable would be like death. I don't know anybody who's yet discovered a way not to die physically. So, but the controllable is what we do on the way to that. There's many things, we can decide to eat better. We can decide to get in discussions like this and reduce stress. We can decide to exercise. I can decide to step out of this chair right now and walk towards that door, as an example. So and some people will say there's determinism and there's free will. I mean, the debate is rather silly in terms of when we individually can recognize. It's like if I was to tell you that I don't have free will, but yet I'm talking, that means my talking means nothing. It's because it's just there's some automatron running it, but it doesn't make any sense because I can stop. So anyway, I digress. Number two meaning was particular feeling, joy, anger, love, hate, and this sort of thing. And that's important too, because you can see the spectrum. And that to me is like the quality of life spectrum, if you will. So those are feelings, right? And number three is instinct or intuition, distinct from reason and knowledge. So that, once again, when I talked about the trinity of the human individuality, body, mind, and emotions, you can see that they're talking about emotions being different than reason. And reason is kind of like the result of mentality, right? whereas emotions are the result of emotionality. So I posed the question to myself, why is emotional health important? And I came up with 3 rough points here, which are a little bit hard for me to understand myself sometimes after I look at my notes after a while. But why is emotional health important is it's important only when we get clear what is emotional health. So point number 1 is kind of trying to answer in a roundabout way why emotional health is important by answering the question, what is emotional health? And in terms of that spectrum I talked about, all the way from, hate and despair and those sorts of things to joy and bliss and whatnot, emotional health would be seeing our free will as part of the controllable side of our life, which can help us to move voluntarily into those states of positive emotional health. And also to recognize the importance of those so-called negative emotions as well, because there are times when they are very valuable, because they prompt us to do things such as emergencies. I mean, if your child was to land in a cold river, fall into a cold river, whatever, you would feel despair in the moment, probably, which would prompt you into action. Hopefully, that would end well. So there is need for all these emotions, and sometimes they are self-defense mechanisms, which is very valuable as well. So all of these things would answer, hopefully, why emotional health is important, to a certain extent anyway. The second reason why I'd say that emotional health is important is because it helps us to be able to truly experience the act or the experience of emotional health. And health, once again, I'll just jump in here and define that as what I mean by health. Also, in terms of its origin, is the word wholeness or completeness. So the more complete we can be as individuals, the more healthy we can be, right? So developed emotional health allows us to experience higher states of emotional health, to which I would say perhaps the most exalted state that I can imagine is love, the experience of love. So why is emotional health important? It's because we can come to experience love on a much deeper level. Love is one of those words that's packed with a lot of baggage, because we have all these things that we think it means. When I say love, I mean the experience of unity. It's like in physics they have this concept called unified field theory, which is that all things eventually become one. Well, we see within ourselves, we see in different religious mythologies like Hinduism and Christianity and those sort of things, we see several gods in one, or several personalities in one. Like in the Christianity, they talk about the Holy Trinity. Holy, once again, is related to the word health. So the complete Trinity, the one is made up of the multiplicity, and the trio within us, within our toolbox. I like to call it our individual toolbox. Is like the physiology, the mentality, and the emotionality. Well, love is an experience of the one making unity with the other. It's the experience of that. It's like the connection. And that's why we often think of the deep relationship, deep and desired relationship between two individuals as being love. And we see that, and we can experience that on a very profound level when we experience the love act. You know, I'd say almost like sexual rapture, where you have it's almost like the mind disappears, the body disappears, everything disappears, and even the other seems to be the oneness. And we can see it too that, you know, this is graphical, a bit graphical for the first show, but I mean, you see that in the state of copulation there's oneness in a way, and also the state of fertilization there's oneness, because you have the sperm and the egg become one entity. There's no longer a sperm and an egg. There's one cell. The two become one. So that's like making love. Love is the unity, and we've had several, the multiplicity. So that's the experience. The experience within ourselves is the unity experience, the unity experience of body, mind, and emotionality. And a little bit long-winded, but anyway. So point number 3 as to why emotional health is important. It's important because we can help ourselves make better decisions in life. And in our last discussion, we talked about decisions as being critical to our coming back to circumstances. You know, if we have controllables and uncontrollables. Well, on the controllable side, if the decisions we make end up affecting our circumstances, then darn it, it is important that we have well-calibrated, shall I say, decision-making processes. And if we can somehow implement our emotions into that process, then we're making a more healthy decision, because we're no longer just relying on one aspect of ourselves and railroading the rest. And so many of us have been taught, particularly men, I think, to ignore emotions or to suppress emotions and therefore not know how to read them. So that what we get is we get perverted emotions that are baggage-packed emotions, shall I say, which bubble up, affect our decisions, and then we end up making corrupt decisions. And I have made many, many corrupt decisions based on emotions that I just didn't understand. But so getting in touch with our emotions, we can learn to, you know, through self-analysis, through self-learning, through the growth of self, really, and perhaps through counseling, through seeking professional advice, we can actually get back in touch with our deep-seated emotional faculty and therefore incorporate it in our decision-making processes, and then we end up living not so lopsided. What I mean by lopsided is, if you could imagine, if we live just for the body's sake. The body has all kinds of urges. You know, if we just decide we just live for the body, then we'll just eat I eat cheesecake all day long, and you know that doesn't make any rational sense. Certainly emotionally, I feel that would be wrong. But if I was to listen only to the body, then that's what I would do. Needless to say, sexual drives, all sorts of other things, and I'd end up as a complete vice-ridden wretch. You know, logically. And it's the same with if I was to live only for the mentality, if I was to live only for the emotionality, I'd be a completely emotional windbag. And so it's important to have a balance there, I would say. So it's one thing to say, why are emotions important? And then finally, how can we improve emotions? I would say the first and foremost would be somehow the recognition initially of the importance of emotions. It's kind of like the first step, you know. Recognizing and admitting are so powerful. I mean, there's a reason I think that AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, starts off with an expression of admission. Because, you know, and if we're lost in the world or whatever, if we can't admit it, then there's no sense, you know, we can't make steps to improve. It's like a first step. You have to admit that emotional health is important. And then from there, we can work on developing it and work on allowing emotions to work in consort with the physical faculty and the mental faculty. And to allow everything to, when we make decisions especially, to allow all those three to complement one another. And be able to recognize that at certain times, certain thoughts are erroneous, certain physical urges are erroneous to the situation, certain emotions are erroneous to the situation. So it's when they all line up and everything makes sense, we can, so I think that's by practicing it, in other words. You know, it's like anything else. How do you get good at playing a guitar? Well, you get to know the guitar, you get some lessons on it. That's important. That'd be an important thing too, to get some lessons. That was where reading information, self-study, getting counseling, this sort of thing, we learn and then we practice. You just take that simple analogy of learning how to play guitar or learning a language. It's really a language we have to learn. That's more than anything. Why is emotional health important? Come back and summarize then. Well, by answering, if we look at the point, what is emotional health? It's like there's a scale, you know, and we can see that we have control over how we can rise in our emotional state, and that all emotions have their value. Then that's an interesting first observation, anyways. And it's also important because we can get to experience love and what love is, because that's like, it's almost like the highest level of emotions. And then finally, because it can help us make better decisions, which is so important to our circumstances in life. And circumstances, of course, have to relate to our quality of life experience, which is what this overriding thing is about. So that's an example of a little presentation. It's a little bit long-winded because I wanted to cover a few more things to put in little diversions and give you an idea of what this looks like. But nevertheless, it's an idea, and I'd probably truncate that if it was a larger group, maybe put it down to a few minutes, and then somebody might jump in at a certain point, and that's good enough, and we run from there. If a smaller group of people want whoever's presenting to continue, and then when it's done, people can take notes throughout. Then there's a discussion. There's all kinds of stuff on the table now to discuss. So, and you know, most people have a notebook or whatever, and they'll jot down little points as somebody's talking, then come back, and so it's kind of like when there's a discussion going on, in every sentence, there's almost another discussion. It just flows out from there, and we get to realize after a while there are so many of us who want a meaningful discussion. This is not just a superficial discussion about the weather or something like that. It's talking about us deep inside and what really matters on a major level, because so much of our life we've been talking about superficiality. And the control people of the world and so on have taken advantage of that. And we just end up talking, and we get fed all that, you know, the sports and all the weather and all that. I mean, I'm not putting all that down, but if we want to really have an improved quality of life in our own lives, in our communities, in our world, and so on, we have to take the initiative to grow ourselves, because it all begins at home. Home is, as far as individually talking about, I'm not talking about anything spiritual at this point at all, and I don't usually get into that too much. I try to stick close to the individual, because that is most relatable to most people. And that's where we live most of the time, right? So I hope that was interesting, and I want to do this more often. If you have any comments, you can make them below in the comment box. I have to sign in, but you can make them below in the comment box, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye for now.